It's Tuesday morning, the 14th of November, about 11:43, and this is session 51.
Right. Hi, David. The voyage continues. You asked me, was land in sight? I intuitively feel that land's in sight, but and the further I go, the more grateful I am in that I focused on what I want for my children and grandchildren, and also recognizing that words won't work, that we need tangibles, and fortunately we're dealing with tangibles. Mm-hmm. And the tangibles are needed to control ourselves, because we're dealing with a very complex situation where the environment is designed in such a way to elicit the wrong perceptions and the wrong actions. Mm-hmm. So it's indeed extremely difficult to keep on the right track, and also very strenuous. But there are rewards because when you feel you're going in the right direction.
Good.
I want to bring up again in classifying myself, and I like particularly the subject matter of problem pioneers. I have two definitive articles, the role of the problem pioneer in creative innovation, and that is by John Patton, Batton, and it was published in 2002 in the Creative Research Journal, which I subscribe to. There wasn't too much follow-up on that. And similarly, in the same vein, but from one of my favorite researchers, Robert Root Bernstein, he's written on problem generation and innovation. If anything, I think we're doing is we're bringing a problem to the surface. Whether we have a solution to the problem is something else. I think we do have some beginning solutions. Mm-hmm. What's the problem? And then I'll come back to what I wanted to, well, in fact, what I'm going to do is, and so I can put it away, I'll just read a little bit about what Robert Root Bernstein, and although it's well known, he repeats it. Here's the abstract. He says, most of the literature on innovation concerns fostering better solutions to existing problems. Many innovators in the science and engineering argue, however, that problem generation is far more critical to innovation than problem solution, involving not just a thorough grasp of what we know, epistemology, but what is not known, and he refers to it as nipistemology.
Negative.
So you add an N in front of epistemology,
mm-hmm.
So we don't know what we don't know. The proper definition of a problem gets an innovator more than halfway to its solution. Poorly posed questions divert energy, resources, and ideas. This chapter explores how problem definition and evaluation act as catalysts for insight and examine strategies used by successful innovators to generate productive problems. And so he's raising the point that it seems to be an assumption that we know the problems. And that's not so. Mm-hmm. And so if there's anything that we're accomplishing in these interviews and what's happened is an identification of a problem or problems. And what's the problem? Is there any fast way? And this is one of the reasons why I believe we must come up with a science fiction story. The science fiction story highlights the problem. Mm-hmm. Do we have some solutions? Yes, we do, but they're just the beginning. The solution has to do with the creation of the epiphany, the coin, mm-hmm. Because we defined the problem a certain way. When I started out, the problem was, how do I get financially free? Financially free to do what? To find laws. In trying to get financially free, I found what I believed to be a law of economic behavior. Mm-hmm. But what the problem here, and I'll come back to something I've referred to before. Excuse me. This article I've referred to before, but it is a very close analogy. It's getting getting the behavior of social insects to compute.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what's happening? These researchers, they're saying envisioning ant colonies as computer networks, entomologists have begun to unravel complex behavior and patterns. So they're examining an ant colony and seeing if they can, in the model they create, can predict the behavior of the ants.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very successful in doing so. Well, that's quite, highly interesting. Here you have supposedly the gods, the entomologists, looking upon these lowly beings who are going helter-skelter all over the place, where there doesn't seem to be any discernible pattern. But there is a discernible pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the power of the computer, they can discern the pattern. Let's assume for a moment that the ants are people. And there are these gods up here in we'll call it a causal land, because down in what the ants are doing, there's likely cause in their mind. So the ant is now a human being, and that human being is taken away from the ant colony and comes up and meets these godlike figures and says, here is what's happening down there. The ant says, I can't see it. What do you mean what's happening? Well, there's the first assumption and a failure to identify a problem, that when you take a being out of one environment into a completely strange environment, that they will see what is there.
Not necessarily.
So the first thing, they have to learn to see. So let's assume that the ant is there, time is not relevant in this other world, and the ant learns to see. And the ant sees what the pattern is that could make the colony much more efficient, stave off enemies, make certain that everybody has enough food.
Prevent extinction.
And has a technique. So this is tremendous. And then goes back. Now, what the ants saw in this other world, these gods showing them, is now a memory. They're back into an environment that is in complete conflict with what they were told. But if the ant is going to achieve anything, stay alive itself, and in turn obtain the food that they want, they're going to have to, one, find a way to act contrary to what their senses tell them, have to keep in mind what they saw,
and communicate it, I presume, to their
and
peers.
find ways to communicate it. And how in the world can you communicate it unless you make it possible for the other ants to experience what they experienced?
Right.
Well, that is a definition of a problem that has not occurred in the science fiction literature. And you say, well, why is it a problem? Well, first of all, it's what happened to me and it's what's happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
We've actually perceived a pattern, how the pattern is generated, and then try to live our lives according to it, but in turn require the cooperation of others in order to do so. And at a time where this was really not popular at all in thought. Well, what's happened since my thesis proposal, and particularly over the last roughly 10-15 years, is that the improvement in the computer has enabled this modeling to occur, where there is a movement within academia that is bringing this
in several disciplines, I would presume.
Across,
yeah.
and we have the blind man and the elephant, because it depends whether you're an entomologist coming into it, you're a physicist coming into it, you're a mathematician, you're an economist.
Right.
They don't have agreeable terms, not the same terminology. They call it econophysics, complexity economics, evolutionary economics. But it all comes down to something, again, very simple. It comes down in a thought experiment to this device. This device historically is extremely important, or else what they're seeing would not have occurred. So in the device where we have we'll call it an algorithm, the way in which the obstacles are placed determines the outcome as far as the pattern is concerned.
So it's impossible, virtually impossible for one of those particles to see the pattern.
No.
And if it's a wave, it's even further away from their perception.
But nevertheless, because of in my own case, who knows why? I guess it's an evolutionary phenomena. I saw it.
Well, you saw it for my sanity.
Well, and for my own, and it determined what I did in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, it's extremely important that this subject matter be introduced to coming generations by this physical device.
Early on.
Extremely early, because it's something beyond everybody's senses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that it be introduced before our children are so conditioned on causality. What do you mean again? Well, these particles, like the ants, if you ask them when they made the decision point here, well, I decided to go left. I couldn't keep on going left. I wanted to, but some others they bumped into me, and this is where I landed.
Lots of reasons.
Now, so, by the way, it was one of the few times I think we got the black ball over in the desired.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, very rare.
Very rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
It's in the improbable.
It's in the improbable slot.
Right.
Very good. Yes.
So, you can imagine.
Do that again.
You want do it? So you can imagine what the problem I've had over the years. Making a living, trying to get myself in a position to take advantage of this knowledge, trying to share the knowledge. Mm-hmm. The fact that if I'm considered to be sane, that I'm still sane.
Well, you've referred often to this as Macbeth's dagger.
Yes.
Because it disappears and it comes back again.
And I come back at it from different angles, as if I was viewing this from here, 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 here. So, focusing on the future generations, fortunately, recognizing that they have to learn to see, and they have to learn to see before they're so conditioned that perception is not possible. We live in an environment that is designed to stop us from seeing and to stop us from doing the right thing.
So in the same way that A square, when he perceived a sphere,
yes,
had the same problem. It was as if he visited another dimension and had to try to explain what he saw to his peers.
Yes.
And all the inherent problems and difficulties.
So here we have a famous story, two famous stories, one with thousands of years, 100 years old, Plato's allegory of the cave. He had different reasons, but nevertheless it's been used in the manner that we're talking about here. And we have flatland. Well, they didn't go far enough. They didn't know that one would have to learn to see. That's the... Secondly, they didn't depict it, that their lives of the community and their own lives were dependent upon the others seeing. So all we're doing is, in honing the problem more, is to go a bit further than they did. Yes. So if nothing more out of this activity, and I wish I was skilled in the art of science fiction writing, if nothing more out of this activity, a science fiction piece evolves in an entertaining way that gets this idea across, and hopefully it'll have we can use literary license and have a wonderful outcome. In other words, that they are successful, and that we've eliminated hunger and such, and we've eliminated wars. But we have here the mathematics of the golden rule, and why we have to cooperate, but also we have to act according to the same model. And this comes back to Ashby, because our brains are inadequate to deal with this complexity, so we have to choose models. All of us act based on the assumption of how the world works. Well, if our assumption's wrong, our actions are wrong. And today political policy is being constantly built on the assumption that we can find ways of getting equality. I'm suggesting that's impossible. I never like saying anything's impossible, but I think inequality and all the evidence for inequality ranks at the level of the law of gravity. And if we understand how it is generated. Now, what's happening? Well, because of the advance in the computer and the fact, the low cost and the modeling, we have a revolution in our way of seeing. It's an exciting revolution. It's different, but it's in the same category as the invention of the telescope, the microscope, the X-ray, and such.
Expanding the the senses.
It's expanding the senses in that we all work on the basis of models. Models that are implicit in our minds. We've never even given any thought where those models come from. If you're raised in Iraq, you have a certain model. If you're raised in Britain, you have another one. If you're raised in Japan, another, and one in China.
And that's what Boulding referred to as the image in his book, The Image,
Yes.
was it not? The model.
The model. And all of us have it. There's different words in the literature. They refer to it as models, thema, different things along those lines. And the dominant thema model determines our perceptions and our actions. What's brewing? A revolution that is, I don't know if the likes of which has ever occurred, because the computer then is enabling us to create models that are dynamic. And then it becomes a question, do we believe the models? And can we get consensus on the models? At the present time, how many people in the world of 6 billion are working? If there's 200,000, it's likely a lot.
You mean working in the field?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know the quantity. If there's 5 million, it's a lot.
Yes.
But it is going on, and it is heating up. It's particularly gratifying for me because we're no longer alone. It is frustrating to be at this age where it's going on, but nevertheless it's also rewarding to have come to the conclusion to focus on the coming generation, because there's just too much going on that's comparable to the blind man and the elephant. But what is rewarding to me, when somebody says, "What are you doing?" I can say, "Read this. If it's of interest to you, I can carry on an intelligent
And
conversation."
what is this? What is it you're referring to?
There are a number of things with regard to this. Particularly what's important, and this shows you again how chance occurs in one's life. Thad Tren, you know, has been a great help, and along with Neil, in being able to dialogue. It may not be as central to their interests as it is to ours, only because that's not where they're at. But Thad phoned me. Thad is now lecturing at Western, and so he phones me Thursday mornings when he's on his way through. And he said, "Burke, I read a review of a book that I think may be cogent." What is it, Thad? It's The Origin of Wealth, Evolution, Complexity, and Radical Remaking of Economics by Eric D. Beinhocker.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Okay. And I
Recent
thought
publication, obviously.
it just came out, and it's published by Harvard, right? And it's interesting. Beinhocker, I mean, how many people are there around the world like this? The bio on him is unimpressive. Eric Beinhocker is a senior advisor to McKinsey & Company. Well, that's okay, so he's working for a management consulting firm. Fortune magazine named him business leader of the next century. And his writings on business and economics have appeared in a variety of publications, including the Financial Times. That in no way gives this man the credit he deserves for what he's done here. Because he's done an encyclopedic work of putting what's going on in a readable text. If certainly for me, I don't know how many others. Now it was rather interesting because I thought, well, before I bought it, I'd like to take a look at it. And I was down at the university, or no, I looked it up first of all, and I find that there was one book at Toronto, which is not surprising, but it's out till sometime March next year. The other book, Scarborough, is on order. So I thought, well, I'll look into the City of Toronto library system, not being optimistic it would be there, because usually these academic books aren't there. Well, it is there. There are 14 copies.
Interesting.
And there's 32 reserves in for it.
Son of a gun.
So it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that look at the acquisition process to know who chose it.
Well, but not only that, the interest. The fact that they've gone ahead and ordered in different libraries 14 copies, and there's a waiting list, is highly interesting.
Interesting.
So the other, I thought, well, I'm going to go into the bookstore and take a look at the book and take a look at the key topics. I want interest in what did he do on inequality, what did he do in poverty, and I took a look and I said, this guy is right on.
Right. Interesting. Very good.
He's in the he's doing, you know, he's a highly interesting person. But the other thing that was of interest to me is that he's in a division of McKinsey that is the think tank division, where the workhorses of McKinsey are given leave to work in this think tank.
He's a fellow.
He's
it's
a fellow.
Fellows program.
Yes, so he will be in the think tank for a while, 6 months, 8 months, a year, then he has to go back to the grind.
Interesting.
Now, whether this man will go back to the grind is something else, because this book is going to make him famous. And so it comes at an important time. But
Now, this is not a compilation of articles written by others.
No.
This is his writing.
He has done an encyclopedic work, and the amount of work gone into this and the intellect required is exceptional. He's out in the tail. But here is somebody who would know he even exists, has a complete grasp of the field.
Wonderful.
Right, 2006 compared to the 1960s.
Do you know his academic background?
I have some other material. He has an interesting background in that, I don't know if he's got his doctorate. I think he has, but I'm not sure. But he's also been in the venture capital business. I mean, he's been a doer.
So he's multidisciplinary, obviously.
Well, he's not only academically qualified, he obviously is a doer, because you know, the McKinsey environment is a very dog-eat-dog environment. You've got to bring in enough billing, and in order to stay in it. It's a boiler house from that standpoint. So now that means, though, that division is highly interesting to me. Well, the other thing is that a very attractive young woman, who I thought think highly of, and I haven't been in contact. The last time I came across, saw her on the street was several years ago. I said, Leslie, we must have coffee. Well, Leslie works at McKinsey. And so I got in touch with Leslie today. She informed me she's 50 now. Now, Leslie I met during the IDEA.
20 years ago, 30 years ago?
In the 80s, yeah. You know, she's really a lovely person. And of course, there I'm communicating using this device. She was exposed to some of it. That was setting the policy of what we were doing at IDEA Corp. So it's not someone who's new to me. And so, ideally speaking, if Beinhocker, he would grasp in a moment what I'm getting at. And if McKinsey wanted to go ahead and present it to Gates, fine. It would be wonderful.
Sure.
But Leslie said he was on the run. She only met him for a few minutes. And that there's going to be a write-up in Canadian Business. It got set aside because of this income trust fiasco. But it will be coming out. And also, he couldn't stay too long. There was some family problem, whether he'll be back. And she suggested...
So he's resident in the States somewhere?
No, he's in England.
Oh, he's in England.
So, but what I'm finding, of course, one of the frustrations is nobody has time. We're all like these balls.
Yeah.
See,
Mm-hmm.
and they have their priorities. I heard back from my
Stubbs?
no. What takes
Young
me a
lady
moment?
in Washington?
Yes, what takes me a moment because her name interferes with somebody else I know. But Eileen Sanders, I know Irene Sanderson, and this is what
Oh,
the
I
problem
see.
is.
Eileen Sanders, yes.
And she said, she wrote me a nice letter saying, I can understand why you contacted me, but my obligations are such and such and such. I can't be of help to you. Why don't you? And she pointed me to the George Lucas Foundation and stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very nice letter, but again, a ball, too busy. It was not a priority for her. And I'll write her back and thank her and ask her if she's seen this book because I think it's cogent. Similarly, in dealing with Stubbs, now, if he in turn wants to, because prior to that, I would have had to refer him to the book by Philip Ball, Critical Mass.
Mm-hmm.
This is the book that Philip won the Royal Society Prize for the best nonfiction,
Right.
which was awarded in 2005.
The links between the two titles, of course, are not obvious.
No, and of course, if you said which is more appropriate, frankly, I say read both.
They both are.
This gives you one blind man's view. You can sense him working through it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one comes from the focus, which I said was necessary as well. It could be the origins of poverty, but nobody would likely buy it.
Yes.
But this is in essence more important than the origins of wealth. It's like I have the website or the name secrettowealth.com.
Mm-hmm.
But if I put secrettopoverty.com,
It's beyond.
it's like negative news sells and positive news
Mm-hmm.
does not sell. So this is background reading, but at the same time, again, continuing with the blind man and the elephant, this is new statistical size distributions,
Mm-hmm.
and in economics and actuarial science. So it too is an encyclopedic work done by people with different backgrounds. But if you notice the curves,
Mm-hmm.
and so these curves are central.
Yes.
But again, we have to remember that these curves are in a box. And that box keeps us in the box. The box has been very helpful to call the Cartesian coordinates or Cartesian axis.
Yes.
But nevertheless, the world ain't that simple. But Christian Kleiber and Samuel Kant, who are extremely well trained, and I referred to this particular book in a previous interview or dialogue between us. But this is the first time, and this came out in 2003, that the whole field was reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a watershed book. And I'd read, but I will read again, because there is a definite bias because the economists don't like this. It's like saying, I don't like the truth, so I'm not going to look at it. Let me just. These models, right, he says, were often criticized by applied economists who favored models based on human capital and concepts of economic man. Well, that concept of economic man is rational man. Right? Some of them scorned size distributions of income and referred to them as anti-theories.
Mm.
Their criticisms often go like this. Allowing a stochastic mechanism to be the sole determinant of income distribution is to give up before you start. The deterministic part of the model in econometrics is what we think we know. The disturbance term is what we don't know. The probabilistic approach allocates 100% of the variance in income to the latter, all right, to chance.
Mm-hmm.
In our opinion, this type of argument shows a lack of understanding of the concept of stochastic model and by extension the probabilistic statistical approach. So here you have a complete nation of economists fixated on a model that is completely unrealistic. They are like the inhabitants of flatland. And now that is changing. This is why Beinhocker says a radical remaking of economics.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are people fighting it.
Of course.
But it is that way. And of course, what Koch is saying is what is happening in the causal is what is happening. But what is that? And what terminology do you use? I'll come back to that question. Stephen Wolfram has gone at it a different way. A new kind of science. And it all interrelates. It has to do with automaton. I'm not pronouncing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
What he's done is, again, he is just an unbelievable mind. But they are all
And what is Wolfram referring to?
Well, he's referring to the fact that I don't know quite how to put this, but it comes it comes because of let me just see if I can get the definition for you. By the way, does that look kind of familiar?
Sort of. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Unusual to see it in
Well,
print.
I'm going to show you it again.
Very good.
In another way, but I want to see if I can get you the cellular automaton. I'm not giving. You'll pardon my ignorance, who's ever listening to me. I'm not giving you the right pronunciation. It's one of my shortcomings.
Automaton sounds right.
Well, it's just a minute. By the way, he has this whole book free on the web. It can be searched.
Oh, wonderful.
And
on his website?
yes, he has. Yeah, I'm right. Cellular automaton, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but I wonder if I don't know where he has
The word is used to refer to something that is robot-like, is it not?
It's robot-like, but it's not unlike these particles moving.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and it becomes visible because of the computer simulation. Let me just find a definition for you. Well, I can't just put my hands on the definition right away. Anyway, the point is, it comes back to Ashby. How in the world can any mind deal with this complexity?
Mm-hmm.
And that emphasizes, again, how our children have to be raised. First of all, if they're raised with a definition, I'm not good at mathematics, that's like saying I can't talk. So
I can't see.
And I can't see.
Yes.
So the whole point of exposing them to these icons, to the epiphany, and to the causal coin, is to provide an environment that will be productive in eliminating some of that.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, all these people are not marching under the same flag, and all of them are mathematically sophisticated in one way or the other,
Mm-hmm.
or else they couldn't comprehend this. So the epiphany is certainly one of the best candidates that any of these authors, I'd be very surprised if, well, put it, each one of these authors will react in an emotional fashion once they understand what this depicts.
Mm-hmm.
And if you went to someone like Stubbs and said, now, your job is to come up for science and mathematics and stochastics in the world for the most appropriate symbol to represent the field. I defy anybody to come up with something more representative
Mm-hmm.
than this particular icon. The other thing that we could face it, let's assume that we went to, not assume, we are going to go to Gates And we go to Gates and we say, now if you and Buffett and others of your wealth, Charlie Munger, the boys at Google, if you all proclaim that these are your good luck charms, and inherent in the understanding of these good luck charms that rests the secret to your wealth, how will that affect the mathematical literacy and quantitative literacy of future generations?
Mm-hmm.
And
Would have a beneficial effect, one would hope.
so it's just a question again of what is the best way
Mm-hmm.
to go at this. By the way, at John's, we're at the Serengers. I have to apologize. I forgot to send them your regards. But there were several sculptures there, and they discussed different ways that they thought they could make a very large.
Sculptors were
Yes,
there, not
yeah.
sculptures.
Well,
Yeah.
I said sculptures, didn't I, or did I say?
That's all right. So they're people, not
No.
inanimate objects.
No, but they are inanimate because John has some of their work.
Yes.
His name just escapes my mind for a moment, but he's the brilliant chap and his sons who are very capable in the field,
Mm.
who took this light aircraft and conditioned the birds to fly.
Oh yes, right.
So,
I've seen him on TV.
Yeah. So he's a friend of John's, and John has some of his
These
work.
are wonderful photographs too.
Yes.
Yes.
So he volunteered, and one of his boys volunteered. Another chap was there.
Volunteered to.
Suggested ways how it could be done with stainless steel.
Yes.
What one other chap who was not an artist thinks that an artist friend of his could do it in glass,
Mm-hmm.
a huge glass structure. So, and then Danny pointed out on the weekend that Izzy Sharp sold his shares in the Four Seasons to Bill Gates.
Oh really?
So that is another way of talking about, discuss it with Izzy. If Izzy had the background, it would be wonderful, because if he actually recognized what this means,
Mhm.
it would be very short route.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Was that in? I'll ask you later.
Yeah.
Sorry.
so what I want to get at then is that it's been a highly interesting week in that the origin of wealth has made our job much simpler.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. The timing is wonderful.
Well, it's quite exciting, and what comes back to when I think of how naive and how I went through the questioning to come to the conclusion that this was it 40 years ago,
Hmm.
and that this aspect, ask and thou shalt receive, seek and thou shalt find, knock and it shall be opened unto thee. That basically I said I wanted to find laws. I followed my intuition on how to get free, and it opened up 40 years ago, and of course I couldn't recognize the complete significance of what I was really looking for.
Hmm.
And now it's, of course, now they don't have sufficient language to talk about this. And it's been rather interesting because he refers to emergent qualities. Beinhocker used the term, and apparently this emergent qualities is, and he refers to the area, he names it complexity economics. We don't have a single name. And complexity economics, I think, gives a negative connotation to it, because really it's enlightened economics. But it's rather interesting that the regularity that they're saying is an emergent quality.
Hmm.
There's no cause, it just
Emerges, evolves, emerges.
So I wondered, he has only one reference to emergent quality in this book. Because you can search the book more thoroughly by going to Amazon with keywords, it still comes up maybe only 4 or 5 times. But it's the key point. It's the fact that there is an underlying acausal order is truly what is amazing, and they haven't quite caught on to that. But one of the things that I was familiar with the work done called Sugarscape, and this is modeling, they say, from ground up. Usually the economists come in, they see what's happening, so they're building models on what they perceive. If you say, now I want to try to duplicate by a model what's happening, in what we do with the acausal, we're duplicating what happens in a game of chance when everybody starts off equal. Then you go to symmetrical inequality, then you go to asymmetrical inequality. Game over, starts again, and it's what you refer to as the wave. Well, that is emergent, and it's from ground up.
Zero-based in a sense. I
Yes.
think the term is used sometimes.
Well, if everybody starts off even, right?
Yes.
Okay? And what happens if everybody starts off even? Well, because the literature has been so overwhelming, and this aspect of Sugarscape has been in the literature since the mid-90s, I wanted to, let's see if I can get this thing here. I wanted to get something to show you. So, these researchers, Epstein and Axtell, wanted to simulate, and they created a fictitious society where there was sugar and spice and people competing. So they start off with if you take a look, remarkably similar to the particles in the gas distribution, in the Maxwell Boltzmann gas distribution.
Yes.
But they in turn, whereas in the gas distribution the particles are there, here they are actually creating the environment where there's equality. And over time, a clustering begins to occur. But what I hadn't read before, which gets us right back to where they wanted to see what was like in terms of the distribution of wealth as it changed. So they created compartments, not unlike the troughs that we have here, in order to determine what happened. And if we take a look, starts off.
These are the histograms on the right here. This starts off.
Normal curve. All right. They didn't start with everybody equal. They didn't draw that.
Yeah.
All right. Then it's getting more
in time.
Then
Right.
it's
And
getting,
what's happening in their simulation? What is this that they're talking about?
well, what they're talking about is that they set it up in these agents.
This is a society that's trading two commodities?
Yeah, that relate to two commodities, and they put in. They have put in the algorithm, which is equivalent to the placement of these obstacles, with certain assumptions, and then just let it run to see what happens.
I see.
And in the simulation, of course, it goes from equality to
Now,
symmetrical inequality.
Where the patterns are shown there,
Yes.
what are they? Are we to look at those as just patterns from above, particles, or it's not on a set of Cartesian coordinates?
No, it's not. It's
They're not measuring anything.
It is on a. It is on Cartesian. They have
On the
a
left,
number of
though.
agents
Yeah,
here.
on the left, though. I'm referring to the other diagrams that look
No,
like petri dishes.
No, this is closer to the gas distribution.
I see.
In other words, you might say, here's an island, here's our piles of sugar, right?
Right.
And piles of spice, and we put a bunch of people down, and we put certain rules,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And so they're all over the place, and then all of a sudden, some orders
Out of the chaos, out of the apparent random movement, order emerges.
Order emerges.
Where there's a pattern.
Yes.
And you can put it on a set of Cartesian coordinates.
Well, that I hadn't seen before, because that is similar to what we see in the applet with the Maxwell Boltzmann gases.
Very
where
similar.
you see this, and then, but this is the first time, because as much as I wanted to go back to the original literature, it was on my list, and I'm overwhelmed. I've been overwhelmed in handling all this data. But I was reinforced to see that he had this here, And you can see that if you raise children from the day they're born playing games related to this, and they're familiar with the coins,
Well, their perceptions,
their
their models will be different.
their models will be different.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the important thing here is that what is happening here we could call, I know it's negative, but it could be called the tyranny of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do I mean by the tyranny of the computer? We've had models that, we all work by models, but now we can simulate these models and run them over time, so we're like time travelers.
Mm-hmm.
So the models that are going to determine the economic and political policy, he has a complete section here on what it means to business and society,
Mm-hmm.
politics and policy.
Very important.
So these models are going to determine the political and economic policies ultimately. Who's going to set them? What's the democratic process? Can the public ever understand the basis under which? What if that which they're trying to institute is so counterintuitive that the people rebel, such as, we'll say, the elimination of corporate tax? So people are not, it's too early in the game, so they're not looking at what has to have, first of all, they're at the area where they don't have consensus among the elite, because you've got all this going on with people with different backgrounds. I'm a psychologist who came at it one way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these people have different backgrounds. So from a democracy standpoint, unless you have an informed public, and anybody looking at this say, you'll never have an informed public on
Mm-hmm.
this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're dead before you start.
Yeah.
So what would happen what environment do you have to raise kids that they are at least conducive? Well, by creating the science fiction story, we've defined a problem that has not been defined.
Mm-hmm.
So it gets out there. By creating an environment with the coin and with the epiphany, the epiphany is like a religious movement, because if people who are teaching our kids are not moved themselves, how in the world can they inspire the kids?
Right.
So I think this has been a true find. It's
Amazing.
it's
Yeah.
quite
Wonderful.
It's quite exciting because it's over the years it's our own self-confidence.
They're responding to Kendall's plea.
Yes.
Finally,
Yeah.
30, 40 years later.
Well, Kendall was earlier
60s.
60s.
In the 60s, yeah.
Early 60s.
Quite amazing.
Herbert Simon.
Are there
was-
any citations back to Kendall's speech that you've
I don't know
encountered?
about Kendall, but they are giving Simon credit. Jiri and Simon.
Yes.
He did. He's missed Galton completely.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he. I'll just see if he mentions Kendall, but I bet. I would bet that he wouldn't. You see,
Possibly not.
no matter how good these people are,
Yes.
they're not good enough to capture everything. They just can't.
No, of course not.
It doesn't matter how good a mind is. It still comes back to Ashby saying
Mm-hmm.
that the neural circuitry we have.
Yeah.
But here's a mind out on the tail until although he's received some favorable comment, until this book, who would know that mind was out there putting all this
Never know.
putting all this together.
Yeah. And
So-
no doubt working on it for many years.
Oh, I mean, how the amount of work that he had to digest and then make it communicable.
Mm-hmm.
It's commendable. Somebody who has a background dissimilar to mine going at it, I wonder how they react to it.
And then find a publisher that's willing to put it out.
Well, of course, it's Harvard Business School, so that's. And the fact that he was at McKinsey, he could get the economic freedom to do so.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the balls falling through, and here's
Yeah.
one gone through a certain
And
way.
then in the tail.
And he's
Very
in the
good.
tail. So it makes me very grateful. I can't compete in that arena, and if I had done my doctorate, that's the arena I would have been competing in.
Mm-hmm.
And by chance, it's put me into the arena of saying how do we have to change the environment, because the environment, we live in causal land. How in the world are we going to perceive a causal land, and how are we going to learn to act according to a causal land?
Does he have prescriptions in the chapter on the social and political impact of this?
I haven't read enough yet, but he's trying to make a point that this is early in the game, and what his purpose is to bring what's happening to the surface. It's too early to possibly recommend too much, although he points out some authors who are recommending changes. One thing that was particularly that he brought to my attention as I was browsing was a book, I think it's Miller. I've ordered the book. It's called The 2% Solution. And this man, an interesting man, he's now a columnist, and he was an advisor to various governments, young man, and I will be forwarding his site to you.
Yes, okay.
And what he's saying is in the, not 2%, he said might be the 2-cent solution rather than the 2% solution. Just let me see if I can put my hands on it quickly. No, The 2% Solution by Miller. I took a look at his book, and I've ordered it down at the library when was I down there? Yesterday. And has no references. But he goes ahead and has an excellent 4 or 5 pages on luck. That's all luck. So he's saying it in a layman's term, that people do not understand, and they fight with the role of luck in what's going on here. So, but he's saying that if we took 2% of our gross product and put it in and used it properly, it would overcome these problems. And
like the golden rule, you mean?
Yes. And what's interesting, it comes back to the Bible, and in the Bible saying that the rich man must put the corner of his field away for the poor man. So, but he's saying that both left and right, both Democrats and Republicans, have to come to consensus on this, and Beinhocker is agreeing with Miller that he's having an effect. There is one section here on inequality, if I can, because he's in. You know, the last thing I need is more information. But on the other hand, if I had
these are pieces of information that that are either complementary or they just reinforce your discovery. I think that's wonderful that you can find them.
Well, what is particularly rewarding here is that, how can I put this? What's rewarding is that when somebody says, "What are you doing?" I can simply, before I would have said read Philip Ball, I'd say read Philip Ball and The Origin of Wealth. These are accessible. They're not accessible to everybody, but they're accessible if you really want to know. And then if you read this, I can discuss with you what I'm trying to do for the future generations. It gives me more self-confidence. It changes. I don't have to preface my marks, am I a Shiger or not? I still may be, but the point is, I don't necessarily. But what he's saying here is there's still debate going on. He refers to the left and right, and that I don't know which I am, left or right, but there are those of us who are saying this is it, and there are the others who are saying no, it's more rational and so and so. And of course it's a combination of both.
Now left and right has political implications, but it also has neurological implications.
Yes.
Which of the two is he referring to?
Well, I think he's really talking about the political economic debate.
Yes.
Let me just see if I. He did summarize it fairly well, but it does show you what how if we're dependent upon changing the attitude of the current generation, I just don't see it. Here we have. we should ask ourselves a question. If we do not know anything about our draw in birth lottery, what kind of system would we want? It's just an interesting question, but here. I may not be able to put here. It says here, complexity economics is still a very new player in the public policy arena. Many of the ideas I've discussed in this chapter are still at a speculative stage, but every day new research is being conducted and the pace of progress and understanding is accelerating. And I have argued that complexity economics both transcends and obviates traditional left-right categorization. It is not a mushy middle ground between the two poles, but rather a new perspective, a new dimension from which to view problems. My personal hope is that by placing economics on a more scientific foundation, complexity economics can help reduce some of the bitter partisanship that has characterized political debate in the United States, particularly since the 1990s. After all, the citizens for whom policymakers work are not interested, after all, the citizens for whom policymakers work are not interested in who scores more points or who wins between the left and right. They just want to see their lives improve.
Right. Very good.
So, throughout this book I have claimed that two institutions have provided the foundation of economic evolution, market and science. To that score we should add a third, democracy. Democracy in itself, an evolutionary system of policy of ideas. As E.M. Forster exclaimed, 2 cheers for democracy, 1 because it admits variety, and 2 because it permits criticism. Over the coming years, complexity economics will inject a new burst of variety into debates about politics and policy. It will be up to the evolutionary workings of the democratic process to select and amplify those ideas that will best serve society. And I would say, unless the future generations are equipped to see and to try to change the current generation, we only have to make sure that the teachers are sufficiently imbued that they can set the scene to train the mothers and fathers to train their children.
Very interesting point.
So that was a major step. That was a major step forward, David. The other thing that has occurred is that I keep on emphasizing to myself, and I told you about this again, and I don't care how brilliant any person is, all of us live in causal land. So what we are prone to do intuitively is determined by the structure, the physical and meaningful structure in our conditioning in causal land. So despite the fact that I may get up in the morning and decide to do certain things, my repetition is to force me to do what I should do from what I've learned from acausal land, because causal land is eliciting the wrong behavior from me. I'd love to have an environment where I didn't have to think, I just got up and did the right thing. I said before that major religions are really designed to create an environment to elicit the golden rule response. They've made progress, but not sufficient progress. Well, the other thing that happened during the week is that Bernie, and this is one of the things of putting myself into an environment that elicits the right behavior. I got in touch with Bernie Cantor. The song, my attorney Bernie comes to mind, which I like.
Yes, you did find it eventually, did you?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
So.
Did you send it to him?
Well, he knows it.
He knew it, yes, of course.
The attorney Bernie. But I got in touch with Bernie because despite the fact I'm not going to apply for patents, I wanted the discipline of applying for patents. Because there is intellectual property here that should be recorded, and this is what, thanks to you, we're doing, as it evolves. So one of the things Bernie asked me to do as we're proceeding to get certain intellectual property protection is he says, I need a brochure, Burke.
On
what on the Epiphany.
the
We have